Hello lovely folks and welcome back to Weird Kindred. Now today we are going to be talking about these rather fabulous little bobbins. I'm going to tell you why I've been trying to get hold of something like this for such a long time, the find that this is based on and where it came from, and why I think it's a brilliant solution to a problem that makers of cordage and braids have been facing for over 1,000 years. What to do with your long lengths. Once I've told you their story, we're going to use them to make the final piece of braid to finish off this dress behind me. You've seen me working on this if you've followed the Simple Tunic and Dress series, and today we're going to make enough braid to go all the way around the bottom in one go using these bobbins. I'll talk you through how to set them up to make it really easy to just extend the length whenever you need to continue your braid. Now, you may notice I've got a new audio recording device this time. There may be some teething problems. Apologies in advance if it's a little bit rough on the audio this time. I'll do my best to get it nice for you. So without further ado, let's get on with telling the story of how these little things came to be. It makes my nerdy little self very happy. Now, if you've ever tried to make enough braid to go all the way around the bottom of a tunic or all the way down the front of the smocker, you will have come across the problem with what to do with those long lengths as you braid. They want to tangle up. You can't just run your fingers down the lengths to keep everything separate at the bottom. You come across the problem of having it braid into itself at the bottom. If you've rolled your thread up into little balls or used clips, as you will have seen me do if you've watched the shoulder hand belt video, you'll know that these things can become tangled, they can wrap round each other, they can generally make the process very frustrating, and that can impact the quality of the final product. If you've watched the video on the 6-strand header braid, at the end of that you will have seen a little section with me using modern lace bobbins to solve this problem. Having your thread wound around a single, cylindrical, fairly thin object makes it much easier to avoid those problems. However, they can't be used in the LHE. What's the LHE? The Living History Encampment, the authentic displays that we do to the public to teach them about the crafts of the Viking Age. I like to get things as authentic as I possibly can in my displays, so what was I going to do? I wanted something that had similar properties to a modern lace bobbin, but that was based on something definitive from the Viking Age. Luckily, I love research, so I've done a lot of reading. I went through all my books, I asked people, I went through internet articles trying to find anything that was described as a bobbin, and I really struggled to find anything. It was quite frustrating because I wanted to be able to demonstrate the techniques with bobbins in the LHE. So you can imagine my joy when I found today's little archaeological gem. Before I show it to you, you may be wondering, well, why didn't you just use a thread winder? Because we have quite a few finds of these. They're square or rectangular objects with indentations to wrap the thread around, which are handy for storing thread for sewing and mending. Here's a diagram of some that were found at Hedeby, and we also have similar examples from Birka with much more pronounced indentations here. These can be made from wood, bone, antler, horn, anything basically that can be carved into this sort of shape, and you'll find plenty of reproductions of these available. The difficulties these present are that they don't sit nicely in your hand as you're braiding, and if you're doing a lot of braid, that becomes quite important. It's very difficult to firmly secure your thread in a way that will also allow for quick release to continue your braid as you go along. They tend to have these corners that tangle around each other. They really are not the easiest thing to use. So you can imagine my joy when I found the artifact that these are based on. In the Archaeology of York, the Small Finds volume, Textile Production at 16 to 22 Coppergate, Penelope Walton Rogers details this item. It is a small wooden peg-like object 94mm long. It's item number 6651, and it's believed to be a tapestry weft bobbin or flute. The piece below there, 6652, may also be part of a similar artefact. When working on a tapestry, these would have been used to control the lengths of thread that weren't actually actively in use. The weft yarn would have been wrapped around probably the rebaited area and perhaps also the main shank, since a similar object from Arthur's in Denmark lacks that rebaited or recessed section. They would have had multiples of these with different colour yarns on, loaded up and ready, and the appropriate bobbin would have been brought forward into use as the design required. With items like this, never get too excited until you have checked which layer an object was removed from, because digs can sometimes span many hundreds of years. Thankfully, this item was found in period 5B, that's circa 975 to the early mid-11th century, making it absolutely perfect for our period. I was very, very excited when I saw that. If we come back to the picture of the artefact again, you can see a modern tapestry bobbin for comparison at the bottom there. Now, similar properties are needed in a tapestry bobbin and the kind of bobbins that I wanted for making my braids. Both of them need a head with a recess behind, so that can trap the thread and keep it steady while I'm working, and also serve as a point for the quick release, not to sit. And they also need a shaft to hold the excess thread that's not actively being worked. So it made a lot of sense to me that I could use a tapestry bobbin as the basis for what I needed for my braiding. So what was the process of getting an idea made into a finished product? First thing I did was take what I'd found to my authenticity team, have a good chat with them and say, are you happy for me to go ahead using a tapestry bobbin in this way? Do you think that is a good way to represent this? Because when you're doing living history, you're always trying to keep things as close as you can to what was actually done in the Viking Age. And you've got to be careful not to speculate randomly and go, well, I can see it could be used for that. Would the Vikings have done that? Honestly, we don't know. But this seemed like the best possible solution that I could find. So once I got the go-ahead from them, I started drawing out what I'd need. I started off sketching out the original piece and then had to think about what I would tweak to make it work really, really well for me. I made them ever so slightly larger, both because that's easier for my hands, which sometimes give me trouble, and two, so that I could accommodate various weights and lengths of thread. Making them ever so slightly larger and making this recess a little bit deeper made me more confident that I could secure those different types of thread and that I wouldn't be having the problem of things slipping off the end of the bobbin. And then I found a craftsman that was willing to turn them for me. Turning is a woodworking method where the wood is suspended and spun. So as it's carved, it's spinning, and this creates symmetrical shapes. And we know that the Vikings had access to this kind of technology in the form of a pole lathe. These are powered by the springiness of a green branch or limb, in which energy is stored when the craftsman presses down on the treadle. The release of this energy then spins the wood, which is carved into symmetrical shapes using the hand tools. As you can see, these are fairly large apparatus and fairly rare to find, so I was quite happy to have mine turned on more modern equipment. And I knew just the person for the job. So we got together and talked about what functionality was needed from these tools. The original looks as though it may have had a groove in it here, which could make it a little bit easier to orientate your thread. These will sit slightly at an angle, weighted because of not having that groove. However, there is a chance that if you can't get that completely smooth inside, it could damage your thread, and then potentially you've got a break in your braid, and that's not what you need. So we decided to go with no groove and see how I got on with that. These are things that you only discover when you talk to people in interdisciplinary ways. This is another reason why I love reenactment, because you've got people with all different kinds of skills and experience that you can draw on to make sure that you're getting the best out of everything that you do. And a little bit of time spent chatting to somebody about something who's got a different perspective can often bring you much more joy, because you'll get information that you didn't have before. Making your brain grow is good. Eee! And here they are. Now, as is often the way with these things, it did take quite a while for them to arrive. However, that's just how things are. We're all crafting around our daily lives, and I can tell you 100% that these were worth the wait. They are absolutely beautiful to hold. They're made from boxwood. They're all cut from a single branch, and it's absolutely gorgeous, buttery, creamy wood. They feel amazing. They've got great balance across the set, and they've been sanded to perfection. They're a joy to hold just for themselves, and I'm so excited to finally have these to work with. I'll note here that I'm not mentioning the craftsman's name to the world at their request, not because I am not absolutely amazed by what they've come up with for me. So now you know their story. Let's give them a whirl. So now you know how they came to be, let's get started with using them in our crafts. Today we're going to be making that 4-strand whipcord that's going to go all the way around the bottom of that dress and finish it off beautifully. The hemline is almost 3 meters in length, so we're going to take 3 meters as our starting line. Then we're going to add another half again and a little bit. That is because we will get some shrinkage as we're braiding. We want to make sure we've got more than enough thread. And we're going to need to leave some for sewing it all in at the end as well. If you end up with far too much braid, well, you can always use it for some other project. No braid is ever wasted. There's always something you can do with these little tails. This little offcut is a piece of the braid that I used to go all the way around the neckline of the garment. Because it's very thin spun thread, I need 3 strands of thread in each part of the 4-strand braid. So I'm going to cut 6 long lengths, and I'm going to double them over so that I've got a really neat start to the braid. I'll show you all of that in just a moment. You're going to need a fixed point to work from. Because this braid is much longer, if you're going to go for this, I suggest something like a door handle where you can move across the room easily. So I'm going to go and gather some materials now, and I'll see you in just a moment to start setting up our braid. So before we start attaching everything to our fixed point, I'll just talk you through quickly what you're going to need if you're going to do this. You're going to need something like these bobbins here. You may be using modern lace bobbins or have some other improvised solution. Anything is going to work as long as it has a head, a recess and a shaft to hold the thread. That's a little bag I made for them. Tape measure for measuring out the lengths of your thread, your chosen working thread. A couple of sewing clips. These are really important because when you're making a long length of thread, there are going to be times when you're going to have to put it to one side and come back to it later. So you need something to make sure it doesn't unravel while you're gone. You need your scissors, your cut lengths of thread ready to go. You can see I've doubled these over. I've cut them so that there is a loop at the top either side, and I'm going to use that loop in just a moment to fix them together. This little piece of thread here is what I'm going to use for that. So before I move all this over to the fixed point that I'm going to use to work from, which is actually my door handle in this case, we're going to set up this thread so that everything is nice and strong and it's not going to move about while we're working. So as you can see, there is an awful lot of thread here to work with. Each one of these individual strands is 10 meters long, folded in half into this loop here. We're going to secure these 2 at the top so that we have 4 strands, each with 3 threads in, that are 5 meters long. And that 5 meters is going to give us absolutely everything we need and a bit extra to make almost 3 meters of braid and have plenty of thread left over at the end, or an extra bit of braid depending which direction we feel like going in. So before we move to our fixed point and start winding these threads onto our bobbins, we need to secure the top loop here with this piece of thread. I'm using the same thread that I'm using for the braid itself, the lighter colour here, because I can tie that in and use that to secure the end of this braid onto my garment. Make a loop, pass this through. This is the very top of our braid here. What you may wish to do, I won't do this on camera as it's quite difficult to manipulate all of the thread there. You can tie a simple knot just in the top here to make sure that that's not slipping to either side. And then you're going to take this length of thread and you're going to make a loop which you can hang over your fixed point to start your braid. When you're happy that that's not going to slip and slide anywhere, you can transfer to your fixed point. So now in a strange and mysterious part of my house you may not have seen yet, we've got our braid set up on a fixed point. I've knotted these two lengths of thread together at the top to provide a really strong starting point that isn't going to slip either way as I start braiding. But as you can see, there's 6 strands each side. We now need to separate these out into their 4 strands, 3 in each strand of the braid. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab hold, walk away, pull it all the way out, keeping the tension equal as I go, so that all these threads are going to sit together nicely as they're braided. Once we've got them attached, I'll pop a little knot in the end of each one to keep them together. Then we'll switch over to a different view so that you can see how I wind the bobbins up. Once you've separated them all out and you're happy with your groupings, just mark one of each colour set with a clip so that you know which is which at the top here. It just makes things a lot easier. I'm now going to stretch these all the way around a chair, bring them back keeping the tension nice and even so that I can show you how to load up the bobbins. So once you've separated out all of those strands, you've still got them attached to their fixed point so that the tension is equal all the way along. What you'll have is 4 strands like this with a single knot in the bottom. I'm going to pop a second knot in now before we do anything else, just to make sure that I'm really happy with how strong that is at the bottom there. Then I'm going to just split the braid slightly and hook my bobbin through, just like that. I'm going to cross them, I'm going to come back again, and I'm going to twist. Usually twice is fine, 3 times if you want to be absolutely sure. And then you've got your thread really firmly attached to the end of your bobbin. What we're now going to do is wind these all the way up until we're about 8 inches from that very top loop that we started with. Twist to keep it all together, and then start by holding with your finger to stop that moving, and then start wrapping around your recess here. Hello, Editing Weirdling here. If you're braiding with just a single ply thread in each strand, you can simply tie it tightly around the recess with a single knot, hold it in place and begin wrapping, making sure it doesn't slip as you wind. If you're working with just one plied thread in each strand, you can tie a single knot at the end of the thread, then split the ply above the knot and follow the same loop and twist procedure shown here. Once you're happy, you can move down and wrap onto the shaft here. I'm going to go and do that, and you'll see what it looks like when we're almost ready to go. Okay, these are almost ready to go. This final one, I'm going to show you here how I make the loop that allows me to control the tension and extend my thread when I'm ready. So you come to around where you want these loops to sit. You put 2 fingers on top of the thread and your thumb underneath. Finger there just to stop it going anywhere. Make a loop, come underneath and bring the head of the bobbin up through the loop. And what you'll end up with is a loop here that can slide. Now what you can do here if you want to is mark that loop to make it easier to find later on. I'll demonstrate with a little bit of this thread here. This little bit of braid I've already done. You can use anything, small piece of thread. You're not going to tie it in, you're just going to lay it in there with the bobbin and then pull downwards. What you've got there is a slip knot. When you're ready to extend your thread, lift it, ease off the tension, give a little tug on your marker thread, and you can roll your bobbin to extend the length that you have available for working. Or if you'd rather, you can pop it off entirely. Extend until you're ready, and then make your loop again. Some goes over the top, you've made a loop, this comes over the top, under and through. Before you tighten it, pop your marker thread in, pull it all the way up, and now you've got a much longer length to work with. Voila, ready to start braiding. I'm going to switch over so that I can have them hanging vertically. I'll see you in a moment. So we're now back with our bobbins suspended from a fixed point. Before you begin your braid, make sure that everything at the top is laying in a natural start position. You don't want things crossed over at the top because that will change the pattern of your braid. Now, this is a 4-strand whipcord. I'm going for the spiral effect as I've done with all the other bits of braid on this. So I'm starting with the same colours each side. And then we're just going to follow that simple whipcording pattern, crossing over 2 and then twisting 2 together. Crossing over 2, twisting those 2 together. It's a little bit tricky at the beginning. Just take it nice and slowly until you are comfortable with the way that your tools are behaving. Try and keep everything nice and tight, and then you can use the braid all the way to the end. And you just carry on working. Now underneath here you can see these are twiddling around a little bit. You don't have to be too careful with them, but at the same time don't be too rough either. Keep working away, controlling the thread up at the top here and just letting the bobbins sit below doing their job. Now, you can go and look at that other video for the pattern if you want more information on how we make this braid. If you are doing something much more complicated, like the shoulder hand braid, in which case you would need many, many more of these bobbins because it's a 12-strand braid, then instead of letting them dangle, you would hold the bobbins and move them into position individually as you go. But for this type of braid, which is very, very simple, their function is just to hold and manage all this excess thread. So let me just show you once more getting that loop, because there may be times when it's going to pop off. You have your thread underneath your bobbin. Again, do your twist and under, and you've got your control loop there. Now, if you want to make your thread longer, you need to open this loop up. You don't have to pop it off and unwind it even, and then pull back towards yourself. Roll it, you can extend the loop, and that will get longer. takes a little while to get your head round doing that, and it's one of those things that you really need to try in order to be able to get confident with. But if you can't get your head around that, take the tension off, pop your loop off, unwind till you're happy, and then pop your loop back on. As you can see, I've got an awful lot of braiding to do. I'm going to go and get that done, and then I will be back in a little while to show you what it all looks like. So, when you get close to the end of the braid, it will get difficult to work with the bobbins. So after using your sewing clips to stabilise the braid, unwind the final lengths, remove the bobbins and finish braiding them by hand. You'll end up with a lovely long length of braid ready to be sewn onto your garment. I love how it looks wound into a spiral, unexpectedly psychedelic. Or maybe I've just been at the hembane again. We started with 5 metre lengths of thread, and the final length of this braid is just over 4 metres. I need just under 3 for the hem of my dress, so I will have some left over that I can find a use for elsewhere. You can see here at the beginning of the braid there is the initial thread from the starting loop, now untied and ready to use to secure the start of the braid onto my garment. And at the other end there, I've just popped a clip on rather than tying it off yet, to keep my options open until I've decided what to do with it. The last thing I need to do is get this braid sewn onto the hem of my dress. I won't cut the excess off until I get to the end, just in case, as there's always a chance of mismeasuring, especially right at the end of a long project. But this braid will provide a lovely neat little line of protection and decoration along the very bottom edge of the garment. I'll be using the same hidden whip stitch technique as I demonstrated in Hemming the Cuffs video in the Simple Tunic and Dress series, so check that out if you haven't watched it yet, or have a look at the Kit Decoration Deep Dive video, which covers multiple techniques for a variety of braids evidenced in the Viking Age. And I will see you when this is all sewn on. And here we are with our hemline complete, trimmed with one long uninterrupted braid. If you take a look inside the hem here and under here, you can see the stitching is almost invisible, holding the braid right on the edge of the hemline, so it protects the edge of the fabric as well as decorating it. If I show you here where the braid joins itself, I've used a very simple joining technique, just tucking the very end behind the start of the braid and securing it with a few rounds of closely spaced whip stitches. When viewed from above, you won't see it at all. So it's perfect for a bottom hem like this. And there we have it, one hem finished with almost 3 meters of continuous braid. And I can't wait to show you it in all its glory very soon. And there we go, folks. I really hope you've enjoyed today's video. I am really glad that I've managed to find a solution to a problem that has been bothering me for a very long time, and one I'm happy to take into the LHE to show people in fields. I'm also really glad that I finally got this dress finished off just the way I wanted to. In the next video, you're going to see both of the dresses from the Basic Tunic and Dress series as part of a complete outfit. And we're going to talk about some little changes that you can make to change your persona's background and location. Very excited for that one. Now, before I go, I just want to say a few words. When I hold these now and I look at the picture of that bobbin that I found in Penelope Walton Rogers' work, there's this really bizarre sense of connection. I've not come across anything else quite like one of these in all of the different finds, maybe because I simply don't have the literature, but either way, even though I've modified it slightly, there's something very special about finding a solution from 1,000 years ago to a problem I'm having today in my living room, miles and miles away from where this was lost. And yes, there may be 1,000 years between me and the person who lost their tapestry bobbing in the mud all those years ago, but we both had the same problem, unruly thread, and we can use the same solution. brilliant bobbins. I think that's pretty special, and it's part of what makes reenactment so rewarding for me. So, have a fabulous day, everybody. I will see you soon. Happy braiding and take care of yourselves.